this is the part 2 of the recording for the supplementary lectures on the mathematical methods, essential mathematical methods for quantum mechanics, and here we are discussing the Fourier transform. So in the part 1 we discussed Fourier transform and visualized a Fourier transformation, a function space as a vector space, and visualize a Fourier transformation as a basis transformation of this vector space. So now we will come more closer to the context of quantum mechanics, and we will start to see that how can we represent an operator in this infinite dimensional space. So to do that, let us first quickly recall that what is the job of an operator. So the job of an operator is to start from a like some it is to take a particular state gate into another state gate. That is, you start from the state gate and take it and the operator will take you to another state gate. So how do I write it in the how do I see this in this particular context? So in order to see this, so let us just take a operator which does that. So let us take one operator which is the differential operator, that is basically taking a derivative of a function, and this gives me another function. So you can now think it as a, now that you know that this function can be seen as a vector and infinite dimensional vector represented in a particular basis of x basis, and this is another infinite dimensional vector, another function which is projected or on this same basis. So in that view, this function this d operator which takes this function to this function can be seen as an operator. So how do I exactly find the matrix representation and try to see this in the matrix form? That is very simple. So you start with this form, which let me call it the d operator. The d is the ddx operator, and put x in both sides. So and then I put the resolution of identity in the middle. So this is nothing but the fx or f tilde x. This is the fx, as you know, this integrates over dx, and this operator, the ddx, is best represented if I call it delta. I first act the derivative on this function that gives me the f tilde x prime, and then I get it at the point fx. So that gives me a delta function. So that is the best possible representation of this, and this is nothing but like a diagonal. If you think it as infinite dimensional matrix, this is a ddx in all the diagonal entries, and that x means that particular x entry. So now let us understand this fully. To understand fully this operator, let me introduce another idea, which is the derivative of a delta function. So notice one more thing, that this d is still not a legal operation in quantum mechanics, because this is just a derivative. This we had not done anything special to make sure that it is an Hermitian operator. It is not yet a Hermitian operator, and there is no reason for it to be yet a Hermitian operator, but we know that in quantum mechanics in operator is associated with an observable, and an observable is associated with a measurement which produces real number, and that is why it has to be Hermitian. So we will see later how to make this operator a Hermitian operator, but in order to do that, let us first try to understand that if it is not a Hermitian operator, then what it is, and what can I do, because then only we will know that what can we do to make it an Hermitian operator. So in order to understand, let us try to inspect this guy, and we will see that this guy is basically a derivative of a delta function. So now derivative delta function is already a weird object. Now what is a derivative of a delta function? What a derivative of a delta function? How do I understand or visualize a derivative of a delta function? In order to do that, first notice that delta function itself has a symmetry with respect to x and x prime, and that is not a surprise, because if this thing represent a x prime and this represent an x prime x, and these two are the same thing, as far as, because they are orthonormal vectors if I think it from vector perspective. So now what is the derivative? So this is the derivative sign of the delta function. It is ddx of this. So if I take the derivative with respect to x, it is this. If I take the derivative with respect to x prime, there will be a minus sign which is from the chain rule. So we know that. So the derivatives, so the derivative it has like a two values, and these two are positive and negative respectively, and that depends on at which point you are taking the derivative, whether you are taking the derivative at x or you are taking the derivative at x prime. So now so let me say let me look at this more carefully. In order to do that, let me introduce a model of the Gaussian, sorry, a model of the delta function, and here a good model could be a Gaussian function. So remember, what do I need in a delta function? A delta function need to be something which is infinitely high at the origin and 0 everywhere else. Sorry, the picture is a little bad. So it is this is infinitely high at the origin, at some point in the origin. Again, it's terrible picture. It is infinitely high and 0 everywhere else. So a good representative is this Gaussian, which is basically has this form, and it looks like this, where the width is given by this delta, some parameter delta, and height is given by this pi delta square. So it is actually 1 by pi delta square. I think I made an error. Okay. So now if I take the delta going to 0, this thing width will get narrower and narrower. So it will get narrower and narrower, and this height will keep increasing, like height will keep increasing. And when the delta is going to 0, this will be almost infinite, and this is almost 0, the width. So it's a good representation of a delta function. And so now what is the derivative of this? I can see that there is a two places where slope changes. So the derivative must be must have this kind of, and this is a maxima, point of maxima. So derivative will vanish here, and this point of where the slope changes, this there will be a change in this kind of a form. And if I take this, sorry, I think this interpretation is a little wrong, but you can check just by taking the derivative of this function that it will take some form or like this. And if I take this x minus x prime to be something finite, if I take it like plus epsilon minus epsilon, so there will be have a peak here and a dip here. So that is the quickest way to check. And then if when I take this all these limits to be infinity or 0 and appropriately put it, and then you will see that this will be like these two peaks will start coming very close to each other. Okay, so now the derivative function, I want to see how the derivative function acts on this fx prime. So this will be this will give me this form, which is so now you can check easily from this that it will have this structure, that fx plus epsilon minus fx minus epsilon, because this it depends on the distance between these 2 points, and that I assume to be epsilon, and that you can write it as 2 epsilon df dx prime, which is x prime is equal to x. So this derivative is nothing but this derivative function is nothing but dfx dx, and that is just to establish that this derivative is indeed something like this. And when you add this, you will also get this dfx dx. So if you are not fully happy with this heuristic explanation, you can do something even simpler. You can take this derivative function and then you write it as a ddx of this whole object. So now here you apply the chain rule and apply it on each of this part, and from there you can show it is nothing but ddx of fx. It is actually somewhat easier, and this was done in the spirit of street fighting mathematics, just to develop a feel for how it works. Okay, now if you have understood that how this derivative of delta function works, you can easily now just claim that this whole object is just the derivative of delta function, and that is an odd function, which means it is, if I take the interchange x and x prime, it will pick up a minus sign. So that is the point, main point which I wanted you to convey. And then you can similarly you can try to look up the nth order derivatives and so on, and you will see this same property persist. There are 3 sub properties which I want you to check also about this delta function, that will be useful at various contexts. That delta ax is delta x by a modulus, ddx of theta x is delta function. The theta function is basically this heavy side theta function, which is 1 here and 0 here, drastically goes there, and because this drastic change of slope, it is expressed, the derivative becomes a delta function. And this one is a little more tricky and non-trivial. It is basically tells you that delta of f of its argument is a function itself can be represented in this way, where xi's are zeros of the function, which means if the function has some arbitrary structure and this is the x axis, so where it crosses 0 at this point, you have to take it, it contributes as a delta function and divided it by the derivative modulus. So these are some properties which could be useful, but for the time being we just want this property, that this guy is an odd function in the sense when you exchange x and x prime, this picks up a minus sign. And that is important because now I want to check the what kind of matrix it is when it is written in the matrix form. So now I have established this is some kind of a matrix which is a delta prime or the derivative of the delta function. This is fx and this is f prime x, which is the derivative of this fx. So now that we have established that, so now in order to see the hermiticity property, we have to take a dagger on it. So if I take a dagger, the x and x prime exchanges and picks up a minus sign. So that means this derivative function, derivative operator is an anti-Hermitian operator. But we want a Hermitian operator. So then what can I do? I can put a I in front and define a new operator called P. So this P Sx prime and P dagger Sx prime is now the same thing. So if I replace the D by IP, so I should have used this sign because D is not equal to IP, but I replace it by IP, then this P is can be a Hermitian operator, and that can be thought of as a physical operator. So a DDX operator is not a legal operator, but a IDDX is a legal operator in quantum mechanics because it's a Hermitian. It's a Hermitian object. So now is that enough for so this must be P, for P to be Hermitian? Turns out it is not, because well this tells you the operator is Hermitian, but it still doesn't satisfy what we need, why we want it to be Hermitian. So why we want it to be Hermitian? Because we, in order to be Hermitian, we expect this kind of things to be true, which means that at the end of the day it is the eigen, it is the state when you sandwich these between two state gates, that is what matters. It's the expectation value and the amplitude, this sort of thing, that's what matters at the end of the day of your calculation, because that is the measurable quantity and that is what we want in quantum mechanics. So it turns out, so as I'll show you, that this hermiticity doesn't guarantee that this guy is basically star of this guy. So this is a number. So if I put this to be like put a star on this, so this is basically f p dagger g. So from here I can just write is g f p, so I can put the p here, gpf, and then I can take the star of this, so it becomes fpg, that is basically fp dagger g, and that can be thought as gp epsilon. So this, I want this to be equal to this. So that is what we want at the end of the, I want this to be a meaningful measurable quantity, which means I want this to be real, but this hermiticity doesn't guarantee that. Why is that? So let's check why it doesn't guarantee that. So let me take this object gpf and put two resolution of identity in between. So if this is same as this, if these two guys are equal, so here it is nothing but so this star is basically I think I made a algebraic problem here. So what I want is that there is no problem. So this thing must be so this thing is basically fp g and star of that. So this, I want this to be equal to that. So that means I can just put f, so I can rewrite this fx x p x and x dagger g in this form. Now since this p and p dagger are same thing, then there is no problem, because that's why I can just write both as p. So I want this to happen. So now I want to check if these two are the same thing. So in order to do that, let me start with this function, and this function is this guy is basically gx this operator, as we know, is minus I df dx, and this operator, as we know, is basically just dx, because this x prime is there. So I can just remove this object, we don't need this part. So this is this. So now I want to evaluate this thing. So what I can do, and this is this side, and this side is basically f star x, and this is basically minus I dg dx again, and this is again dx, and so I overall star of that. So when I take a star of that, it should become I dg star dx fx dx. So are this thing, does this thing imply this thing? So that is what I want to check. So if I want to do that, I do an integration by parts here. So the integration by parts will give me this first part, and this is the second part, and this part, second part, is nothing but this. So check this thing, this is a very simple thing, just doing integration by parts. So this guy is same as this guy, except this part, which is the first part, first term. So this we can call it a surface term, because this surface term is just product of two functions and their difference at the point a and b, at the point a the edges a and b. So that's why they are like surface. So in higher dimensional, they will be the surface of some volume integral. So we want this product to vanish at a and b. Does it do that? Because at the beginning we said that our function is something like this, which is something at the a and b, it goes to 0, or at least like it goes somewhere 0 earlier, such that it is 0 also here. So if that is true, then it is okay, but that is not necessarily always true, because if my function is something sinusoidal, which is at so if this a and b, even if I take the a and b to be infinity, even then the function is not 0, then this term will have some contribution, then these two things will not be equal. So the requirement that this hermiticity requirement will not give me anything, like this hermiticity requirement will not satisfy this requirement that the expectation values are real number. So what is a way out? What is a case where this is not a problem? So one case where it is not a problem is if you consider a periodic function. So periodic function means the x is some periodic objects which goes from 0 to 2 pi, and the p is basically minus I dd phi. So in this, so here by convention I am taking this dip to be minus ip. So that's why I am putting a minus here. Okay, sorry, this is not a problem actually. So the p, even if I write it p ip, so the p is basically minus id. So that's why I can write it just minus I dd phi. So then this function at the point 0 and 2 pi, since they are the same thing, so this subtraction also goes to 0. So even if the function itself is not vanishing at 0 and 2 pi, there this surface term is vanishing. So then in such case it is not a problem. But we don't want always to deal with this kind of periodic function. We want to deal with wave functions and things which are defined over an entire real number line, and then it turns out that the kind of wave function, only kind of wave function which truly becomes represents a Hermitian requirement, which would truly satisfy a Hermitian requirement, are the ones which vanish at x equal to infinity and minus infinity and minus infinity. So something which does anything else but vanishes at the end. But that is not necessarily always true, because there will be always some other type of functions which don't vanish, So then those are problem, and usually those are some wave function, as I said, that they don't satisfy this requirement, and one such example is this. So this is a perfectly allowed, we will see it is otherwise by all means it's an allowed function, except the fact that it doesn't fit within this requirement. So this is a wave function of a free particle. So free particle wave functions are in that sense. So this is again a representation of the original problem, that these things are not truly square integrable, and they don't correspond to truly satisfy the requirement of a Hermitian measurement or Hermitian operator measurement. So but some wave function of course will satisfy that, which is the some kind of bound state wave function, is which takes this form e to the power minus px. or plus px, like it has this kind of form which decays to infinity. So this is the kind of wave function which satisfies. So this operator is Hermitian for this kind of wave function, but this operator is not Hermitian for this kind of free particle, this kind of wave function. But we will see nevertheless this kind of wave functions represent something physical, and we will understand, we will explore this issue in much deeper way and try to understand this much deeper way in later. So the for plane wave, so let me see, there is a way out to try to resolve this issue by tweaking the definition little bit here and there, as discussed in Shankar, that in a plane wave we can see this surface term can be written as something like that, and we want to see if this goes to 0. So we can see that if p is equal to p prime, then it is of course 0, then it is not a problem. But if p is not equal to p prime, so here it is, here I am saying that this g and f, they are basically representing the plane waves. So if they are plane waves of two different momenta, then the function keeps oscillating even at x going to infinity. So sometimes to get a way out of that, people define this object as some moving average, like you take an average over some region. So it's an oscillating function, and you take average over some region. In that sense, this object you define it to be like that, then the average goes to 0. So this is it. By tweaking this definition, you can sometimes people try to explain this, but it is not a very but this doesn't really resolve the issue. But this is one of the anomaly of this theory, that there are still some wave functions which are, as I said, which are not strictly square integrable, or which are not strictly in the domain of Hermitian, but still nevertheless they represent some physical object. So the plane wave or the wave function of a free particle is something like that. But as you will understand that because of uncertainty principle and all that, so there is no truly fully plane wave. It's always some kind of a wave packet, and a wave packet of course dissipates, and of course by dissipate I mean of course vanishes to 0 at x equal to infinity by minus infinity, because it has a finite width. So so even though the theory requires you to have some kind of plane waves, in reality you will never encounter this problem, because there will be never a truly plane wave. You will also, because of uncertainty, you will be never be able to actually measure a precisely p momenta wave particle, a precisely p momenta, and that's why this uncertainty will save you from this anomaly in the physical situations. But nevertheless, this mathematical problem is there. So this mathematical inconsistency, but it doesn't pose any issue in the physical requirement or in the physical theory. Okay, so now we want to understand a little bit more about this eigenvalue problem of this p operator. As we define, this p operator is basically the operator which is minus I ddx. Okay, so now let's see. So we already, so to notice that we have actually already solved this problem earlier. So let's say this p operator has some eigenkate p and eigenvalue p. So then if I sandwich it with an x and then I put the resolution of identity, I can identify it as the problem of momentum space wave function, or like some function psi p x which satisfy this is p. And we know already that what kind of, this is basically a first order differential equation. We know the solution of this. The solution is e to the power ipx, and we have already discussed what kind of normalization issues are there in the class. And we argued that if we take a we will take that this a equal to 1 by root 2 pi to make sense it within the all the normalization and all that to make sense. So this p basically represents a state which is of this form. And then we wanted to use the all these delta function properties to show that this p inner product with p prime is basically this delta function. And as we said that we had this plane wave has this property of problem of square integrability. Okay, so now what rules out that this p cannot have or cannot have complex eigenvalues? Nothing ruled it out mathematically, but physically, as we said, if they are Hermitian operator, they have to have real values. and if they have complex eigenvalues, this complex part will actually be the decaying part. And we wanted, since we wanted P to be Hermitian to keep the surface term vanishing, but if we have mathematically speaking, if we have the some complex part, we will keep it restrict to 0 to represent the physical Hilbert space. Okay. So that is the now the true definition of the wave function is now broadened a little bit because of this anomaly. So the a wave function is but it in Hilbert space it is a ray, in the vector way to say it is ray, but when we come to the function space, because of the infinite dimensionality, some extra complexity comes. So now the true definition extends a little bit, and the definition is now so the wave function belong to a space of functions which can be either normalized to unity or it is a Dirac delta function. So if we include these two, then it becomes the whole space of wave functions. So okay, so now we also notice that in some cases actually this unphysical state which comes because of the complex numbers will have some interesting applications and some interesting role to play, but at that we will see later. Okay, so now that we have understood all this, now we can recall that what we learned in the lecture, this x basis to p basis business, that can be, this whole thing can be seen as a Fourier transformation. So this is a repetition of what we already learned, and by now you must have already guessed that what is this going to be. So that we realize that f vector kate can be written expanded either in x basis or p basis, and in the function form this becomes this. So this is nothing but the Fourier transform which allows the passage from one basis to another. Okay, so now this fx is and we realize that this p operator is trivial in the p basis, just like the x operator is trivial in the x basis. So if I put the p operator between these two and look at the eigen matrix form in the p basis, it's just p prime and the in the diagonal, and similarly that for x prime. But this we have realized this p operator in the x basis is not so, it is iddx, and with similar way you can show the x operator in the p basis is iddp. And so here we write it down. So how the x operator acts on an arbitrary f. So when I write it in the x basis, it acts like a x, just its job is just to multiply fx by x. So that you can see very simply, because this guy is just x, so this fx is just this. So symbolically we write it, this fx just goes to x fx. So that is the reciprocity. Now we can see the reciprocity between these two space. So now if we write down now the x operator in the p basis, so we have learned already how to write the p operator in p basis and p operator in x basis. Now we will like to learn that how to write the x operator in p basis. So I again use the resolution of identity twice in the x basis to see the projection of, because we know how the x operator looks in x basis, but we want to see how it looks in p basis. So you use the resolution identity which takes you from here to there. So this is nothing but x with a delta function, and this is the px prime and px double prime, but delta function makes them same. So now we can use the delta function and the definition of, use the definition of delta function and use the definition of derivative of that delta function to show that this object is nothing but this derivative form. So this is nothing but this I ddp, of course with the delta function form that gives you. So to be precise, this is nothing but I delta p minus p prime ddp, or to in shorthand I can just write I ddp. So the act of this x acting on an arbitrary function in the p space is basically I dgp dp. So here to summarize this whole story, so in the x operator basis, which is a small x, x acts as x and p acts as minus I ddx, and this is when it acts on a function fx which is in the x space. So similarly in the p operator basis, which is the small p, the p acts as small p just by multiplying a number, which because it's the eigenbasis of that is multiplying number, and the x acts as I ddp. So the operators which has this kind of interrelation, they are called conjugate operators. So notice here I built up everything from a pure mathematical point of view. with putting some constant like Hermitian and all, which just because of the physical requirement, and we landed on this kind of a structure. So how this conjugate operator, so now we want to show that this conjugate operator x and p will not commute. To see that, we will act the x on f. So if it is in the x basis, we know that this is x f x. We act p on f. If it is in the x basis, it is minus I df dx, that we have just written. We have just written down that here. Similarly, if I act first p and then x, so the p will give me an xf. So this will give me an xf, and then the act of acting x on it will give me an ix df dx. Sorry, if I first act the p, sorry, if I first act the p, it will give me a df minus I df dx, and then the x will just multiply a number x, because whatever this df dx is just another gx. You can say it is just some arbitrary function, so its job is only to multiply an x in front of that function and nothing else. So if I do it the opposite way, it will be something x. So it will be first acting the x, which is first multiplying the number x, and then take the derivative on top of that. So if I subtract these two, this will form the commutator in this side, and this side, this subtraction will give me an extra term, which is this I f x, which is coming by taking derivative of this part, and this part will remain. So that is equivalent to writing it down when I take it off the x kate from the x bra from both sides. It is equivalent to I times identity f kate. So this xp is nothing but identity times I, this identity operator times I. So that's basically the commutator of x and p that we got. So any pair of this kind of conjugate, or this kind of relation, which conjugate relation operator, they must satisfy some kind of commutation relation. So that is what I wanted to show here, and this is true for any pair of operators like that. And there are many other pairs like that, as you will see, but here we are showing it for position and momentum, and that is the whole bottom line of this program. Okay, so let me try to view this thing as a yeah. So that is all I wanted to say. I just wanted to see if I missed anything. Yeah, so that's all. So basically, wanted to construct a dual a space of two orthogonal eigenbases, which have this kind of a relation, that such that if I have one orthogonal eigenbasis is like the x basis, like infinite dimensional eigenbasis x, like write it, sorry, so I write it as x prime, then I tried to construct an arbitrary operator ddx, and then we realize it's not Hermitian, so we wanted to make it Hermitian by making it minus I ddx. And then I realized that if this operator, if on this operator I call it an operator p, then this operator has its own eigenkates, and this the commutation, the transport from this eigenkate to this eigenkate can be done by a Fourier transform, and that Fourier transform has this is like equivalent to expanding an arbitrary kate in the basis, where the bases are plane waves. And then we realize when two operators have this kind of relation and vice versa, like if the p is p prime, then in this basis this operator, this x operator is basically I ddp, then they satisfy this kind of a commutation relation. So purely from mathematical structure we have realized this, and then we will see that how we can identify that as we have already seen that, but this is the mathematical background of this, how we can identify them as position and momentum operator. So that's all.